So we're going to go into post-production.
Post-production.
Basically, we had Roberto Rosali come in and be the main editor for the project, and he was putting in 6-hour days minimum, and he did this for 2 weeks because we only had 2 weeks until the studio was shut down.
Yes.
And at that point, there were no ifs, ands, or buts. If we didn't get it done by then,
we were going to get summered out.
Roberto was one of my favorite people to work with, aside from, I'd say, these are not all of my favorite people to work with, but just a short list on one hand. Greg, William, Greg's brother, Roberto, and a couple other people were my favorite people to work with on this film because they made things very much... they turned things into a positive experience where if we ran into something that, we hit a wall, we go, well, how can we jump over the wall? How can we demolish the wall? How can we keep going? And that's a really great attitude to have on a film.
God, in return, working with you was fun because you wouldn't give up every time we hit a wall. All I had to do was say, well, how are we going to fix it? And we would both start thinking about it instead of getting negative and, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? My brother, of course, you spend years growing up with a man, and you end up enjoying the experience. I love working with Josh because he knew exactly what we needed to see. All of my crew was fantastic.
One of the things about having a good editor is that they can take a scene that might be running a little too long or might be not coming out the way that I intended it to, and they can cut it and put it back to the original form that you had up here in your mind. And
with Roberto, he could, a lot of time, put what was in your mind's eye on the screen.
As close as possible.
With what we had, he couldn't work miracles, of course, and make things just appear out of thin air, but...
Or could he?
He did the darn best he could. He hit, I would say, as high a crescendo as he possibly could.
Post-production was just insanely different from pre-production and production. Because we're in a small, tiny room the entire time, and it's really dark, and we're just trying to match up audio, we're trying to make things flow properly, we're trying to get the running time at a good length, which we never really had to worry about because we cut out so much of the script. But at the end of the day, it was just a completely different experience. We're not out in the heat, we're in an air-conditioned room. At the same time, though, we're faced with a similar crunch where we had 4 days, and 2 weeks might sound like a lot of time to edit this movie, but
it's not.
It's not a lot of time at all, especially when you know that if you don't get it done, the whole thing is going to just collapse.
Yeah.
There was a lot of color correction to emphasize, the scene where we were in your room, we actually cranked up the blue.
It up some more, yes.
In the beginning, we boosted the orange. There were times where we were outside and indoors too. There was a lot of red and green indoors, with the bandanas and the blood. Yeah. And then we had the green walls. So visually, it was a lot of fun to play with, and I'm sure it must have been for you guys as well on set. But in post-production, it was really cool because, just working with all these different colors, that's one of the things I actually really enjoyed about the movie on more of just like the aesthetics is just the way it ended up looking. Basically, there's not as much to talk about when it came to post-production, I think, is what we'll end up kind of...
Yeah, there was a lot less people sticking their hand in the pot, so there was a lot less to go wrong.
Yeah.
It really, mainly any problems we ran into post-production stem from production or pre-production, if you can really go that far back. And that's really why you have to nip problems in the bud, because they'll roll downhill, as it were, and make it a problem.
Yeah, there were times when I think the biggest problems we had in post-production, there were shots that magically went missing.
Yes, I remember. To this day, we still don't know what happened to him.
The final shot of the movie is the 3 remaining main characters, because one of them dies, walking off. It's the walking off into the sunset shot.
Yes.
Yeah, and I thought it would be a really cool shot to end the movie on.
That's one of the reasons I liked the script initially, actually.
It went missing, though. Nobody could find the shot We filmed it at least a couple times, and that's still a mystery.
Yep. You never know with who's behind that. It was an experience.
Yeah.
No ill will born. I think that the whole experience was enjoyable. Everything. Some things go wrong in everything you do, and despite all the errors and maybe what seems like a lot of stiff finger pointing, it doesn't matter. It got done at the end of the day, and
we have a movie.
And it's regardless of pointing fingers at whoever you may think it is, it doesn't matter anymore because it's done.
It's all said and done. We've got our film. We're happy with it.
If anything,
we're very happy that we got to do it.
It definitely showed us a lot of problems that can occur that need to be fixed, and would be fixed next time we film something, because it can be a small problem can just blossom over the course of a few days.
I'd like to point out that when we started shooting this movie, I was already in production with another film called Survival of the Fittest. And that film went on hold, did Sundown in Glenwood. After Sundown in Glenwood was finished, I went back to filming Survival of the Fittest. And I've said I will never shoot two films at the same time again. It is so maddening. It's so stressful. It's just like, it might take 6 months to a year off your life if you do it. And the thing is, walking from Survival of the Fittest to Sundown in Glenwood, and then from Sundown in Glenwood back to the other movie, it was crazy because I had complete control over Survival of the Fittest. And I don't mean this in a good or a bad way, and I think I've talked with you about this before. Yeah. The vision I had for another film I did called Survival of the Fittest came out probably 90, the closest to as I could possibly get it to the vision I had in my head. I'd say about 90% of the way there. Sundown in Glenwood was about maybe 60% of the way to the idea of the movie I had in my head.
I think another funny thing with it is, technically, we completely finished Sundown in Glenwood before Survival of the Fittest.
Yeah. But
we still ended up, Peter's Survival of the Fittest ended up getting released well before that, because we were running into video errors that we had to...
Trying to export the movie.
Yeah. It's done now. Go watch it if you haven't already.
So looking back on everything, going through pre-production, production, and post-production, let's talk about the actual film itself, the final product. What are some things that when you watched it you were like, I liked this about the film?
I remember when we went back, every time I watched that, I'd remember things like when my brother slammed his head into the door frame, and just some of the issues we ran into, like, we don't have enough boxes to really stack for this. What are we going to do here?
Oh, man, that drove me insane. Yeah.
And just the challenges that we overcame at every step, despite constantly running into more and more and more walls. We surmounted each and every one of them and finished it. That, I think, was the most enjoyable part of the whole thing. Really, having challenges and then completing them.
And seeing them finished.
Yes. And definitely, with the amount of problems we ran into, it would have been completely understandable that it may not have been finished and put out, but we still surmounted each and every one of them and finished it.
So when you watch the film, what are some things that you don't like about it?
I hate my acting.
I like your acting.
I'm one of those people that's very self-conscious, and in retrospect, even if it's not true, it feels like my acting was terrible.
No, it's good. And actually, I've talked to people we've worked with on the movie who have said Greg did a good job. Because you only had like one line in the movie, and you basically just had to... you know what I mean? So people have said, yeah, he did fine.
It's so funny, because I think the reason it's sold in the end, if you will, is because I managed to just get into the kind of mode I would be talking with my brother. So that is even though that was a scripted line, that was basically us, how we would have been talking to one another anyway.
You played yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so did he, right? Like, you guys both just played yourself.
Luckily,
that worked out really
well. It worked
well.
out that way. The film itself, I really enjoyed. I guess on the same token would be all the errors that we ran into. Because it was frustrating to sit down and plan the whole film and then have these problems just crop up. You're like, how did this even happen?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess then turnabout's only fair play. What was your favorite part of the film?
I really liked the performances from your brother because he played two characters in the movie. He played one of the truckers in the beginning, and he played the lead vampire. I really liked our two main actors who played the outlaws. I thought those guys were really good.
They were good.
They really delivered. It's just such a pleasure to see them hold up the movie so well.
They definitely... It was surprising. It
Mm-hmm.
was, and they stepped up to the plate and knocked it out.
I really like the fact that we took basically, it was between 17 and 20 pages to a 9 to 10 page script and actually made it work in its own format. Instead of, again, the first act being build up, the second and third acts being all the action, horror, we took the first half of the movie and made that be the build up and the second half be the action thriller. Because that was really something that I worried about was, are we going to have a movie after cutting this much out? And we do have a movie. It's entertaining. I don't think it's great, but I don't think it's terrible either. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember having a lot of that. Will it work?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Peter, it will work. Trust me. Just
Yeah.
trust me.
Yeah. I think that being able to go back to this movie like once every 6 months or once a year, because I have to take, I give it like a long break and I go back to it, and I'm entertained for 10 minutes, you know what I mean? And that's really a lot more than you could ask for when it comes to productions where you have to cut so much out of the script and you have a lot of things going right and a lot of things not going your way, and walking into this kind of experiment that we've never really been involved with in this way. We've maybe worked on films, and I've directed my own short films and had small crews, but not to the extent that so much was outside of my control, and to still have it be an entertaining movie at the end of the day. That's one of the things I really like about it.
That being said, what part of the films did you dislike or not enjoy as much as the rest?
There were a couple of shots in the beginning where we got a little bit of the logo from the truck in there, and I don't know what I can say to that other than this might have to get cut out because I don't want to offend anybody.
I feel for you.
Yeah.
But to be perfectly honest, with that logo issue, I remember looking at it and then having him say something at it and looking at it 2, 3, 4 more times, and it didn't really jive with me. And then when it's like this right here, well, I guess that's an issue. Luckily, we got away with the black and white logo, and it looks like it might just be a delivery truck with some sort of stuff on it. If you freeze frame, you can see the issues. But
I think the biggest problem I had when watching this film, that I guess we can say, is I think it needed to get to the halfway mark sooner. The halfway mark shouldn't have been the halfway mark. The halfway mark should have happened after the first 3.5 minutes. All of the adrenaline and the running and gunning and all of the really intense moments of the film should have started right at the 3-minute mark. We shouldn't have waited halfway. I really wish that we had more of the second half of the movie, and in the original script, that was the majority of the film, was the second half of the movie. Well, I think that about wraps up what we wanted to sit down and discuss with you today. We just had this idea that we should put all of these different stories and our thoughts into one place, because whenever we hang out, some way...
right back to this.
Yeah, we always end up talking about Sundown and Glenwood usually. I mean, maybe there's like... Actually, I don't even know if we've ever hung out and not mentioned it, at least like for one 5-minute conversation. We wanted to go ahead and just sit down tonight and record and just let it roll, and whatever came out, we'd end up with. And if we decided there were things that need to be cut, which I'm sure there will be a decent amount that needs to get cut, for one reason or another, we will give it the axe. Well, again, I'm Peter Parsley, writer-director of Sundown and Glenwood.
I'm Greg Holland, co-producer, Grip Electric Key.
And that does it tonight.